I think a lot of people spend most of their time waiting for a great idea.
I love taping Chatter That Matters in front of a live audience. And today, as part of my hosting duties for Canavision, a phenomenal conference organized by Randy Rowe, one of the most respected voices, mentors, and cheerleaders for the Canadian cannabis industry, I get the privilege of interviewing the one and only Michele Romanow.
The first thing I learned is that you have to be really scrappy when you build a business. Like, your whole personality can't be precious.
Of course, she'll share stories about being on the Dragon's Den. Where I spend most of my time is on her approach to life and the many ideas she's turned into reality.
One of the things that I would say made us really successful as a team is we didn't care who was right. We cared about getting things done.
If I could bottle her mindset into a tonic and serve it up to Canada, I would.
Successful people do what unsuccessful people weren't willing to do.
Because what this country needs right now is exactly what Michele embodies: attitude, fearlessness, a love of life, and a belief in what's possible.
I like to say, being an entrepreneur is going into the ring every single day, getting a black eye, and then having to walk back in 10 minutes later and keep going as if nothing had ever happened.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast. And ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated. Today, I have an honor to introduce someone who's a dragon, a disruptor, a deal maker, a mentor, a maverick. More importantly, she's redefining what it means to get entrepreneurs who have a dream capable of doing it. Please give a warm welcome to Michele Romanow. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here.
I want to begin by going right back to your roots out west and from an entrepreneurial family, I guess, in the oil business, because I can only imagine you must have been a handful.
I think I was an easy child. I was very keen. I was very ambitious. I grew up in Calgary. My dad was in the oil patch and my mother was a nurse, but they weren't entrepreneurs, but they were very good at encouraging me to become an entrepreneur and saying that the right time to take risk, I think, is when you're younger. Then my parents told me I could study anything I wanted as long as it was engineering. So with that abundance of choice, I went off to Queen's University. I quickly discovered I was going to be much better at building businesses than building bridges. Of course, coming from, parents from the oil patch, I was like a bleeding heart environmentalist at 19. And I was like, the first business I need to create has to be totally sustainable. I was like, we should try this with something simple like coffee. And so I opened a place on campus in my third year called The Tea Room, which aimed to be a completely sustainable coffee shop. It's still there, if we can believe it, which is really cool.
Is there a picture in that coffee shop?
I think that would be very self-congratulatory. There's no picture of me hanging there, but we did start it all those years ago. And then I had the lucky fortune of meeting two guys at engineering. And we spent all of our time playing what's the next $1 million idea. I think what became a 20-year history of us brainstorming lots of different ideas and then building businesses on top of that. Early iPhone applications to all sorts of things until finally settle on pursuing caviar and fish farming. So you're all supposed to laugh right now because that's the craziest thing that 3 21-year-olds could have possibly come up with. But we had really good reason. Worldwide supply of caviar was down by 95%. The world had overfished the Caspian Sea. I cold called Thomas Keller from the Queen's University Library and I asked why he didn't have caviar on his menu. And he says, well, do you have any? And then from there, we literally moved to New Brunswick, built a business from scratch. It was all fantastic. And
what does that do? I mean, there's so many people that dream. As I would say, a lot of people in university are looking for, especially now with the .com billionaires that came out. But the difference is you actually move somewhere and do it. What do you think creates that appetite to go beyond dreaming, the actual hard work and making things happen?
I think a lot of people spend most of their time waiting for a great idea. And like everyone's like, oh, I got to like wait, and it's got to be a big idea, and it's got to be massive, and it's got to be perfect. And like, you know, Uber was a big idea, and all these things were like big ideas. I actually think most things start as little ideas, right? I mean, if you look at the Uber app, the original version of it was auto dialing a black car service, right? And so sometimes I think people wait. And then I think the second thing, how do you force yourself to get going? I mean, you literally just have to force yourself to do it. There's no other way to start trying things. And it's messy, and it's like a swimming pool when you dive in. It's like, it's never warm. It's never really comfortable. But as soon as you're in the water, you have to tread water, and then you slowly start iterating and figuring out your way to make something happen.
And how important was it having the other two so that you had some element of sinking or swimming together in that cold pool?
There are some people that are a sole founder, and I have an enormous amount of respect for them. I think that would have been very, very difficult for me. I had 2 co-founders for the first 10 years of my career, and then 1 co-founder for the next 10. First of all, misery loves company. Like, there's nothing like being in that rowboat with one other person being like, oh my God, can you believe this? Are we going to sink or swim? You know, the second thing is that when you average your performance as a founder over a 10-year period and you have a really good co-founder, you're never in the exact same synced cycle, but you kind of do the same amount of work. And so when you have moments that you're feeling really down, or you're just like, don't have a lot of good ideas, or you're just not being as productive, that other person carries the team for a little bit, and then you carry the team for a little bit. And that give and take, I think, makes a really powerful teammate. So finding the right person is critical. And people ask me often, they're like, well, how do you know you find a good co-founder? And I'm like, you just have to start working with them. And I think in the early days, having an easy exit strategy is also really important. Like, hey, we're going to try this. We're going to give it our best for 6 months. If one of us doesn't like it, this is kind of how we'll end things. It is really difficult.
And how about who has influence and who has authority? Because I mean, there's different parts of the business. Is it naturally fault of your different skill sets, or did you have to at times say, you're going to be the lead on this, I'm going to be the lead on that?
Totally depends on the size of the company. When you're small, you do a little bit of everything. And then as you get bigger, you have to very carefully divide up divisions, departments, direct reports, all of that stuff. And usually have someone that has final authority on things.
7 businesses before you're the age of 35.
Yeah.
Do you remember them all?
Do I remember them all? I remember every detail of them all.
And tell me, because that's a big body of work at a young age. It's almost like that Beatles, they did it all in 8 years. I mean, 7 businesses. What did you learn along the way?
The first thing I learned is that you have to be really scrappy when you build a business. Like, your whole personality can't be precious. Successful people do what unsuccessful people weren't willing to do. It's just like a series of, can you do a pitch today? Can you clean a toilet? Can you do everything it takes to get it done? Can you call someone and get someone to do something for free? That scrappiness is so important. It leads into scrappiness and speed is maybe the first kind of principle. The second thing that I really learned over the 3 was you got to stop planning and get going. It was really your second question there, is how do you get out of planning mode into just execution mode? So that was kind of the next thing I had to learn. And then the final thing is that, there's never a perfect idea. The great innovation comes from iteration. It comes from trying a lot of things. I mean, even our last product at Clearco, funding e-commerce companies, really came after we had tried 2 other completely different business models. So it takes a lot of time. And every time you have something that fails or doesn't work in your business, you got to say, well, what were the elements that did work? How can I take those going forward to the next one?
And how do you balance egos? Because if somebody has that idea and they're passionate by it and they've got their blinders on and they're going, we can make this work. And you're on the other side maybe and seeing that it needs a lot of work. How do you deal with that? I mean, is it just because you've become so close as partners, or is it at times there's a lot of friction?
There's a huge difference between ego and between conviction. So ego is, I want to be right because I think I'm smart. Conviction is, I just think there is something there that we are not quite doing. One of them is just like a challenge. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's try one more thing. Let's figure it out. Ego is very different. And when you have co-founders, you cannot have ego. This is one of the things that I would say made us really successful as a team, is we didn't care who was right. We cared about getting things done. I remember we used to have meetings where we would divide up our tasks. Sometimes you just have tasks where one person couldn't get it done. And so what you were going to do is someone else would be like, oh, don't worry. Maybe I need to call that person. Maybe we need to try and complete that sale. And it wasn't like, oh, you failed and I'm taking your job over. It's like, we're here to just make progress as an organization.
You know, you look at those 7 businesses. Is there one you're the most proud of? Or you're going, it was just such an exciting time in your life to having so many things going?
No, I mean, it's like, do you have a favorite child? You never have a favorite child. Oh, yeah, exactly. Look, the common thread throughout all the businesses were, how do you democratize access to something, right? How do you democratize access to better deals? How do you get people to buy on the internet? I mean, that was really like some of our first business. How do you democratize access to capital was really the Clearco business. I had taken so much rage from being an early entrepreneur, having it so difficult to get funding. I mean, even back 15 years ago, to get a payment processor, you needed a giant personal guarantee to do that. I mean, today, now you can get started on Stripe in 10 minutes. That anger and what I had gone through as an entrepreneur fueled the ability to build a business that was totally different. And so when we built Clearco, it was about, how do we give founders access to capital that's based on their data and it's not based on who they know and where they went to school and who their parents were. And how do we back those businesses so they become big? And I mean, we've put out more than $5 billion to 10,000 different companies. Like, the scale has been remarkable.
When you're just talking about using data as kind of a key metric for putting out capital, does that take away intuition and the human involvement, that it becomes really just the metrics of the business versus, because when I certainly see in the Dragon's Den, and when we're evaluating entrepreneurs, we're also looking in their eyes and saying, do they have the fire? Do they have the energy? Mm-hmm. Do they have the ability? Do you factor both in?
So in the Clearco model, we just factor their data. We don't go through pitches and we don't do subjective reviews of things, which is one of the reasons I think it became so successful and so scalable. It also, we realized later, took the bias out of a lot of these decisions without doing anything. When we look at our portfolio, half of it is women, a third of it is minorities. I think a quarter of our founders don't have post-secondary education. Like, it's really extraordinary. When you do an equity investment, it's a little bit different. You're going along for a very different sort of ride. In the Clearco model, we have the ability to recoup our capital over time from a royalty model. When you equity invest, you're on a journey for 7 or 10 years with a founder before they exit. And so there's no question that in both, if you want a successful founder, you need someone with an extraordinary amount of grit and determination. I like to say, being an entrepreneur is going into the ring every single day, getting a black eye, and then having to walk back in 10 minutes later and keep going as if nothing had ever happened. You need that kind of no matter what.
I was listening to one of the interviews that you did, and everybody sees you as this overnight success, but you said the first 7 years was an overnight success, and I think for 2 years, you didn't even draw a paycheck. How important is it, do you feel, for entrepreneurs to have skin in the game, not just their intellectual or emotional capital, but their financial capital?
I mean, it's the difference between an employee and a founder. You can get some really great employees that can add an extraordinary amount, but you will never get what a founder is. And I, you see this the most when you get into more mature companies, that are 7 or 8 years in, and you have 2 co-founders and one of them wants to kick out the other one. And I'm like, well, be very careful, because as much as like there are differences and this is causing problems, you'll never be able to find someone with the heart, the soul, the willingness to wake up at 3 a.m, the willingness to spend all of their spare time and their spare thoughts thinking about how to make something successful.
And what's the trade-off then? Because on the other side, I would argue that the concept of balance doesn't exist, at least at that point of your life, because you're all in.
It doesn't.
And a lot of the entrepreneurs I've talked to said it doesn't exist at all when you're an entrepreneur. You just have to choose this life and hopefully find not just partners in the business world, but partners in life that are going to accept this obsession or passion.
Yeah, I used a couple of frameworks for myself. I think the first was that I look at balance. Like, a lot of people look at balance in a day, right? I'm going to work for 8 hours today. I'm going to have 8 hours of personal time, and then I'm going to sleep for 8 hours. That's kind of how they look at a 24-hour cycle. The only way I could force myself to do this was I was going to look at balance as a year. This year, did I get enough time with my family? Did I get enough time with my friends? Did I get enough time to go on trips? And then if I was working 12 or 14 hours the other day, I would just figure it out. So that was, I think, the first concept I used with balance. The other one is that you actually do have some time off as an entrepreneur, it's just very difficult to anticipate when that time off is going to be. Because sometimes you'll either have a deal fall apart, so you have a little bit of downtime. You'll have a deal close and everything's fine. You'll have some downtime. But it's like those moments where you're like, nothing's blowing up this weekend or nothing's blowing up next week. Now we should like go away this weekend or go away next week. And so I get that with a lot of people that have a partner that has a very fixed schedule, those are very hard to do. But if you can have a partnership with someone who's like, great, I'm down to do anything, or I'm down to go somewhere, I'm down to take advantage of this time off, I think you can feel like you get some downtime as an entrepreneur as well.
On your journey, both as obviously your own as an entrepreneur, as an investor in the Dragon, just what you're doing now, investing in others, is there certain qualities that if you're going to write a book about it, or you're going to get on and say, these are the 2 or 3 things that if there's connective tissue or a cord that seems to kind of roar through entrepreneurs, have you defined that?
So the first is this like resilience, authenticity piece. You have to have a why for doing your business besides it makes money or I knew something about this before and so I continue to do it. Like it has to matter to you. The people who are invincible as founders are the ones that are like, look, I had a parent die of this disease and I'm determined to fix it. Or I had something personal happen to me where I'm going to right the wrongs and change the industry. And then you get a lot of momentum and satisfaction when you change an industry, right? It was very exciting to see me uproot some of my competitors along the way and getting really excited. I remember this moment in Clearco. We're about a 100-person company at the time. This is maybe 2018. We were one of the first companies that did lending to founders without a personal guarantee. So the only other company that had done this was another fintech out of the Valley called Brex. And I still remember the day that Amex responded and they created their first credit card without a founder personal guarantee. And I remember like almost crying in the office. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that these 2 little startups were 100-person companies could make a product that a Fortune 50 company had to respond to. Because you can change the whole world. You can change the trajectory of whatever your industry is and what's happening, because the most magical thing about capitalism is people have to respond when there's a better product. And so they had clearly been losing business to us, made a revision that made life better for all founders, which was really, really cool.
It's sure another magical moment, because I have to believe there's some founders that you invested in. You talked about minorities, people without education, women that you invested in that would probably have never had a chance to dream and do. Is there any stick out for you that go, that's a life well lived versus just money well made?
I mean, at Clearco, I can think of tons of examples of like the ex-military veteran who said, look, no one would back me in this world. A woman that her business was making enough money now that she could leave a 10-year abusive relationship because she had some money to go out on her own. I mean, these are stories that just make you like cry at night, being like, I can't believe I was even able to have an impact in this person's life. And then, on the equity side through Dragon's Den, I've just had incredible stories and have become really close friends with the people that I've invested in. I mean, I think of someone like a Mark LaFleur who, came on the show, I think 7 years ago, pitching a company called True Local, which was how to get farm to table kind of meat delivered to your door. And we did the deal 7 years ago. My partner and I helped him get a full exit to a public company. He crushed it. I mean, he literally became a race car driver, was racing for Mercedes. He's now built another AI startup. And what's really cool on this season of Dragon's Den, they're going to do a full circle episode where he's going to be one of the founders that then has become one of the dragons for one of the special episodes, which I think is really cool.
I mean, you talk about you've become really close friends with these people as an investor. Do you think that in some ways that's your calling now, that you're going to spend a lot of your time more in the mentorship, that Yoda role? I mean, capital is important, but obviously somebody that's willing to give a hands up has got to be so important, especially nowadays where there just seems to be such this roar of negativity that somebody's in your corner is sort of talking about positivity and possibility.
Well, you need that. I mean, I needed a lot of mentors and a lot of people that believed in me throughout building the business. And that will always be a part of my role and part of my life. Whether I'll go into full-time operation is hard to know if I'm going to go back into like a 14-hour a day operating role. But I mean, it's the best job in the world to be like, how do I invest in the next generation of founders and create that future together?
What's the advice? I mean, you talked, earlier about resilience and authenticity, but what advice do you give to somebody that comes to you and you decide you're going to invest in them or provide funds for them, to let them know that it takes time? Because I have to believe that if you were in my corner, I would suddenly be very focused and preoccupied in making sure I do well by you, because you're that sort of celebrity and have that sort of caliber to you that it changes the dynamics.
I want to make sure we're not confusing two things. Doing well by me to impress me is kind of useless. Doing well by the market is very important. Yeah. Like actually figuring out how to drive performance in your business. And the only way you do that is, especially before you find product market fit, is speed. Like how fast are you testing different ideas? Most people, when they start working with me and my team, they have no concept of how fast we move on things. Like we will find a deal. We will call every single person we know in the space. By tomorrow, we want you to have proposals out for all of those people. Like when I'm in like beast mode, I believe there are 4 days and 1 day. There's a day before 10 a.m. There's a day before noon. There's a day before 5 and there's a day before midnight. You can literally go 4 times faster than most human beings because you put 4 days in one. The speed and the momentum you get from that is crazy because it energizes your whole team. And so it doesn't matter if I show up and you're like, oh, Michele really likes you. Like, this is like useless. But if we're going fast and if we're figuring something out really quickly and if we're moving quickly to market, that is the big differentiator. Because remember, at the end of the day, a big company can really almost do everything better than a startup can. Like, would you not agree? Yeah. Big companies have more people. Yep. They have more money. They have more reputation. The only thing a startup can do better is move quickly. And big companies are horrific at moving quickly. They have all sorts of groups that make them move slower and slower and slower and slower. And so when you lose speed in a startup, you lose 80% of your competitive advantage right away.
So when you're looking at equity investment, is it hard to find people capable of operating that speed?
Yeah, for sure. We're like not used to that speed because Canada often doesn't operate at that speed. Like you got to give Americans credit for this. Like you show up and, you even meet someone on the street and they'll like talk to you. They'll like listen. I'll be like, okay, I can't help you with your business, but I got 2 people that can. I kind of know what you need. You'll connect over text message, especially in somewhere like New York or Silicon Valley. People will meet you that week. You can see that that's what makes some of these economies really successful is the speed in which they allow for connections and the clarity in which they can do that. The other thing that Canada really lacks, and I love this term, someone recently gave to me, is the like, oh, we'll do it in 2027. You know what that's called? A Canadian no. No one's polite enough to say no. So they just delay the process forever, which is much worse because at least when you have a no, you have clarity. Like, I know where to spend my time now.
How do you think we need to institutionalize that mentality in Canada? Because I agree, the status quo, we take great comfort in sort of standing still, but the world's moving pretty quick around us.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know if it's an entrepreneur's job to do that. I think the only thing you control is your own input. You just have to be that person that is like on top of it, on the ball, responds very quickly, is very creative, comes back to people, does your best to like help out and connect other people out. Fixing that problem for Canada, I mean, the burden of that just keeps feeling heavier and heavier every day.
If you think about it, like 98% of all businesses in Canada are small and medium-sized enterprises. They're the ones that are driving the economy, and we need more of that.
Those are the words of Alan Depensier, Senior Vice President at RBC, just talking about RBC's commitment to small business. And we come back, Michele and I talk about stories and how stories can become your superpower. And of course, my 3 takeaways.
Small business is the heart of our economy. It fuels our communities, brings energy to our main street, employs 2/3 of Canadians, and turns passion into possibility. It's in our collective interest to keep that heart beating strong. That's why RBC is here for every step of your small business journey. From day one, you'll get expert advice to help launch your dream, easy business registration, flexible banking, digital tools and mobile access to keep you connected and in control. Need funding? RBC offers smart credit solutions, cash flow support, and guidance on how and when to scale. We'll even help you find new customers with our marketing partnerships and insights. I know because when I started Chatter AI, it was RBC that I turned to. When small business thrives, Canada thrives. Your ideas for starting or scaling a business happen here because small business matters to you, to me, and to RBC. Visit rbc.com/smallbusiness and turn your dreams into reality.
Also, it just feels better as a human. You're like failing fast. It didn't work. Okay, you didn't think about it. You learned your lesson, you moved on. You got to take your learnings away. Like, you're just dumb if you're not doing that. But you don't have to dwell in that because 3 weeks later, you've already tried 2 other things that may or may have not worked.
Today, my special guest is Michele Romanow. Many know her as the Dragon. People listening to this will certainly know her as one of Canada's most successful entrepreneurs.
In a couple of interviews that I watched of you, you're so passionate about stories and storytelling.
Yeah.
I could just tell the smile on your face.
For
So
sure.
share with us the power of storytelling in terms of moving that needle and operating that speed game.
Who remembers the story of the Princess and the Pea? Put up your hand if you have read the story of the Princess and the Pea in the last 20 years. This is the perfect example of how powerful stories are. Princess and the Pea is it's a really silly story. This woman can't fall asleep because there's a pea under her mattress. Every single one of us somehow remembers that. I think there was something in us and in our DNA that allowed for us to remember stories in a very different part of our brain than everything else. This is what you have to remember when you do a pitch, is that almost everyone will remember your story. They'll remember you, a little bit of what you looked like, and probably why you were running the business. They're going to remember if your stats and if your facts and if your numbers made sense and were good. But I literally can't remember a number from a pitch a week ago. And I can remember this stupid story about a pea and a princess. That's why you need to tell stories. You need to tell people your why, because it's what makes you memorable. And ultimately, people will give you an hour of their day. They'll listen to your pitch very clearly. But whether they give you the next 20,000 hours of their life depends on how memorable you are.
What stands out in terms of a story that makes it memorable? Is it just the fact that they're personalizing it, that there's a pain point or something they identified as an unmet need, like you did when you were saying sell things on the internet? Or is it the fact that they're excited that David took down a Goliath like you did with Amex? I mean, what is it that stands for you when you're in that den or you're listening to pitches that you go, that is the Princess and the Pea story?
So part of it is authenticity. You can't make up a story and facts and why something matters. It has to be deeply personal. And if it sounds contrived or it's fake, that's the worst version of that. You got to think about what it is that you're telling. Part of a story is the conciseness in which you can tell it, right? People will not wait for your entire life story. They'll wait for 8 sentences of your life story. So putting something together that's compelling and memorable is a bit different. The next thing about good businesses is there's something very clever in them. There's a win-win model on both sides of the equation that makes a business more than simply arbitrage. So arbitrage is, the idea of buying low and selling high, right? We can all figure out how to buy this water for 30 cents and sell it for $1. But over time, there's going to be a lot of competitors that are also going to try to do the same thing. What it's going to do is it's going to margin compress all of us. I'm always thinking about, how do I get out of the arbitrage game into the perpetual competitive advantage game? You'll look at a company like RVZ, which came on the Den maybe 8 years ago. They were 2 ex-police officers from Ottawa. I thought they had no business building a tech company, and they didn't, because neither of them, they're ex-police officers. Neither of them had any experience building a tech company. But they were so scrappy, they had individually bought 4 RVs themselves, started renting their own RVs on this platform that they had built in the evenings after they finished their day jobs. And the compelling part about that marketplace model is that it got more powerful the bigger you got, because both sides were winning. If you were a customer looking for an RV, you wanted more selection than what was available at like the 3 RV rental companies. And if you were someone that owned an RV, there was 2 million RVs in Canada when they launched in 2016. On average, were used for 2 weeks a year. So you think about the size of that asset class being totally underutilized. And you also think about the type of consumer that you have where, like, if you're buying an RV, making another $4,000, $8,000 a year is like really attractive to you by renting this. And so every time the platform got bigger, both sides of that equation were more and more powerful. And so that was a really good example of how it's not a story, it's an element of the business model on why you are going to be, more successful. I mean, today's version of that is how do you get organic views on TikToks? How do you create user-generated content networks, keep talking about things. And that cleverness has to come through in your storytelling.
Is there a story that you bought that you wish you hadn't?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, that's my job is like VCs fail 80% of the time. I mean, what are the reasons that companies fall apart? Like there's like 10 big ones and 100 little ones, right? Co-founders start fighting, a deal falls apart. Macroeconomic risk changes. We had lots of companies that died or got close to dying during COVID. Those are all okay, but then you have to have a couple ones that win, which is why, you're taking bets on things that could be potentially really big.
And do you ever worry about or try to improve that sort of Pareto effect that you have a few that succeed and the other ones fail as you're moving on in business? Has it changed your kind of lens and what you look for? Or is your appetite for risk the same today as it was when you were probably less experienced but had the energy?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I mean, or you structure deals a bit differently. When deals have a different upside, you can structure things as a royalty so you can get your capital back at the beginning. You can do slightly different deal structures. But no, I'd say I'm still pretty bullish on investing. And sometimes it just takes a long time to get through the cycle.
And when we had this pre-interview, you were talking about becoming a new mom.
Yeah. I have a 13-week-old at home.
Yeah.
So she just said.
Is that changed anything? Is it too early or is it just you're trying to deal with the fact that sleep deprivation and everything else? Or are you starting to is it make you think about life differently now that that baby of yours is going to live 100 or 120 years?
I think it's really cool. I mean, I became a mom a little bit later in life. I was 39. It's pretty magical. It definitely makes you think about building a better world just for them because you like existing in it. I think even with an infant, you see the like wonder about like very simple things in this world that's really, really fun. And I think you appreciate that your own energy and ability to have energy is like really infectious with children. You made an interesting comment, which is that, yeah, our kids are going to live till 100 or 120. And I would love that to be true. But I also think we have to like always keep ourselves in check. Like as much as we have like really interesting like diagnostic tools and I'm all for them, constantly figuring out new cool biohacking things to do to myself. I think we also have to look at like the other flip side of that argument, which is like we've put more chemicals in food than like humans have ever ingested before. And we have diseases, especially in the US, that are really chronic and really unexplained by any conventional measure. And so we actually might have a situation where our lifespans decrease. You might be actually the longest living generation because you grew up in the generation before processed food largely exist. When I was born in 1985, the craft dinners of the world were just starting to peak. And we were talking to all the moms about this being the okay thing to consume in any quantities. As much as I always like believe in our ability to improve the future, I think health is going to be one of these really interesting ones that might give us still a few surprises, right? It's very surprising today that like the fastest growing rate of cancer is between 30 and 40-year-olds right now.
Let's take a couple of questions from the audience and then does anybody have a question? If not, I'll keep going.
Have you ever made an investment in the cannabis space?
So I was late to cannabis, I'll be perfectly honest. I had quite a few friends that were involved in the industry. I think that Ontario makes it a little bit difficult because they compete with the people that are then selling. But I think it's like any other industry. There's like, the biggest thing I can tell you is like Clearco is a fintech, but it's technically in the lending bucket of companies. And when we started in 2015, all of those years, lending was like seen as the worst space. But that ended up being the best time to build because we had very few competitors around us. We could really define the new rules of what we thought it would be. And then like any other space, it turns around. And so, that's kind of how I think about opportunities. I know my colleague on the show, Manjeet, had done quite a bit in the cannabis space.
Anything, another question?
Do you think you'll see a pitch on the Dragon's Den when it comes to cannabis?
What happened? I know CBC had a bunch of rules as cannabis was getting legalized. We did do that episode the 1 year. One of the great parts about that show is we see pitches from every industry and everything.
When you're doing the Dragon's Den, like what we see on television, what's it like to be in there? I mean, it must be very intimidating for people to come into the den. The dynamics, like how soon into that pitch do you have a sense of this is wasting my time or I'm really quite interested in where it's going? Is it really just the story that they lead with, or is it because everybody must get their time in court?
They really keep all the pitches a surprise to us. So we actually have no idea what's coming on. So when they start with the skit and the props and everything, we're have no idea where this is going. So I think that is really actually fun for us and entertaining for us. So I usually have a pretty open mind for the first 15 or 20 minutes. Do I like this or not? Do I want to spend time with these people or not? There's some big red flags. When you can see tension between two co-founders as they're standing there, I just imagine spending 100 hours on the phone with these people. And I'm over my dead body. There's just not going to happen, because you can just feel that you're going to be playing police on how to get these people to manage their emotions. Then you see people that are energizing and exciting and inspiring, and they're giving you energy, and you're oh my God, I want to spend more time with them.
The journey is not a perfectly paved speedway. There's times when you're going to hit roadblocks. Sometimes a sledgehammer is going to knock you off the path. You're grinding. What gives you that inner strength to keep pushing forward?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's remembering that every founder goes through this. So it doesn't matter if you're reading the book about Apple or about Nike or about any of the famous companies, they almost didn't make it. Every company is 2 turns away from bankruptcy at all times. And so when you remember that that's part of a normal journey, it becomes a lot easier for you. And then you have to do a series of just, again, that speed of execution, right? You have 5 tier 1 priorities, and you're going to try and push that deal forward, get that crazy hire, work for that crazy distribution deal, whatever it takes in your space, in your company, in your industry, you're just going to drive forward. And then honestly, it's just it's that combination of consistency. One thing's got to give, right? The best analogy I can use is health and fitness. Do you wake up one day and you're skinny? I mean, this is pre-Ozempic days, but you just have to get up and do it, right? You have to get up and you have to go work out and you have to be consistent and you have to just there's no other substitution for that consistency and trying things, being disciplined, going to bed on time, eating enough protein, all the stupid things you have to do to keep yourself healthy. And then one day you're wake up and you're wow, I'm so strong. And you're not really, wow, I'm so strong. It's wow, I worked to be this strong.
Michele, I always wrap up with my 3 takeaways. And one thing you said, that the difference between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs is successful entrepreneurs do what most people won't do. And I thought that was just really profound. You'll clean the toilets. You do whatever it takes. You just have this attitude of making things happen.
And that people were unwilling to do those things.
Yeah, they're unwilling to do it.
They're too good for them. I'm not too good for anything, man. And the less precious you are, the more successful you will be.
And then the second thing is just says, we talked about, and I think one of the chords that we played through this whole thing is journeys and different journeys. But I really like what you had to say about speed, making 4 days into 1 day, the fact that your slingshot is your speed. Goliath is going to move slow and it's going to be lumbering.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can go in there and take market share at a higher margin is something that we can all take great satisfaction of.
Yeah.
And what we heard today in this conference is we've really got to move this industry from sort of commodity to much more transformative, much more value added. I would argue that's Canada's quest as well.
Oh, it is. And it's Canada's quest in agriculture as well, right? This is not a problem that simply exists in this industry.
And I guess the third thing that I really took away from it is just how humble you are at your success. You're a phenom at a young age. You've been successful in so many different fronts, but I think the thing that you love the most is somebody you connect with. You really are attracted to humanity. And I think that makes you a very special investor, because I think a lot of investors really almost want to discount the value of the human being and focus all on the data. But I think there's something very special about you that focuses on the magic of the human being and will find a way to make the balance sheet work. So I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining me now is a friend of the show, a friend of mine, Alan DePontier. He's the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for their small business portfolio. Alan, welcome back to Chatter That Matters.
Hey, Tony. Good to see you.
We're doing a series on small business in October because we all know they are the oxygen of our economy. They breathe life, innovation, jobs, energy. When I say small business to you, to RBC, what comes to mind?
You know, small business just brings a lot of positive emotions to me personally. My family's had a small business. My grandfather started a business. My father ran it. I was a small business owner at one point. When I think of small businesses, you know, you think of the storefront or you think of that business in the community. But what it really is really around, you know, the people behind the business. It's about the resiliency, you know, the courage to take that first step, you know, being resourceful and really being kind of just the heart of the community.
How do we open people's eyes to the fact that very often with a small business owner, their life and livelihood is woven together. They're going all in. So with it, there's a different level of pressure, intensity, and energy. Letting everybody in Canada realize that makes us maybe more accountable to seeing them succeed.
The thing that makes a small business really successful is the ability to wear so many different hats, right? Like, you know, one day you're waking up and you're the head of the sales, and the next day you wake up, you're head of operations, or that, I shouldn't even say the next day, in the same day you're wearing all these different hats. And the people that truly make that leap into a small business, you know, you really have to applaud them. It's a big jump. And it's that kind of, what I like to say, perseverance is really what makes them successful. Is, you know, they've got to build the business on many fronts, and it's not a straight line to success in most cases.
You know, I read some alarming statistics is that there's less entrepreneurs today than there was in the past. What do we need to do as a country to create the conditions and circumstances that help them make the leap by saying, yeah, it is a jump, but it's a jump you can make with the help of Canada, with the help of organizations like RBC?
If you kind of compare the U.S. versus Canada, I think in the U.S. they just have a mindset and celebrating small businesses. It's like, I'd like to see more of that in Canada. I'd like to see, you know, the government, large corporations, as well as even like universities and colleges and other educational institutions, like really drive and encourage folks to drive small businesses and entrepreneurship. If you think about it, like 98% of all businesses in Canada are small and medium-sized enterprises. They're the ones that are driving the economy, and we need more of that.
I've had many newcomers on my show, and many of them actually have started a small business and with the intent of passing it on to the next generation. How difficult is it to pass the torch from one generation to another?
The thing about family businesses is you have many dynamics that would be different than you would have in a more larger corporation that's, you know, has shareholders and stuff like that. So, you know, a big part of what RBC offers is helping folks through that transition, because there's the rational side of it and the steps you need to go through, but there's the emotional side. There's that emotional. One of the biggest things comes back to trust, right? Like, is the generation that started the business, are they willing to pass it on to the next generation? Do they trust them? Do they give them control?
Let's talk more about RBC, because I know that putting you in the position they've put you in is because there's a real commitment to small business. Talk to me a little bit about what RBC can do to help people that dream do, and those that do scale their business.
You know, if you think about the life stage of a business, there's the starting phase and there's the growth stage. And as we just talked about, at some point, there's that transition stage. So, you know, we really look at helping small business no matter what stage of that journey they're in. If you're starting a business, it's a series of firsts, whether it's opening your first account, what account do I get, is about how do I finance my business. Big part of RBC too is because we do bank a lot of small businesses and large businesses, is like connecting them with others that have gone through similar experiences. And then we have tools online. We have things like business plan builders, and we have a whole hub around starting a small business. We've created this whole capability called Beyond Banking, because we found a lot of our customers, not only did they want banking services, but they also wanted help on those other things. So for example, there's a venture that we started called Owner, which is really around helping you register or incorporate your business and make that seamless.
Alan, one of the things I'm always fascinated with is speed. And an entrepreneur has to work at a certain speed. How do you match the speed of and the appetite of an entrepreneur with the realities of running a big business? How do you connect the two so that people know that we can be at the pace you need us to be?
Our clients don't judge us versus other banks. They would judge us versus other companies that they deal with, and just that overall client experience and the simplicity and the speed of getting decisions or the speed allowing to things. So we've invested heavily over the last few years. In fact, we're rolling out this new digital platform called RBC Edge, which is really this modern platform to allow you to managing your banking online and to make payments. If you want to grow internationally, it has new services to manage cross-border banking, really making it easy for them to have, it's almost like a control panel for their business where they can actually do the things they need to do without actually having to pick up the phone or go into a branch. So I think that's something we're continually innovating in. And then I think as you get into areas around more complex decisions, like around, maybe it's financing your business, that's where things like AI tools and pieces are going to be components of a future state for RBC in terms of helping get those decisions made, to kind of speed up those decisions. We're also looking at how do we make it easy for them to look at other sources of financing. So we have a partnership with like Grant Match, which makes it easier for small business to learn about grants that are available and make it easy for them to apply and qualify for other sources of financing. So a big part of the mission of RBC around small business and just businesses in general is really make it easier for them, be much more proactive versus them having to ask. They're wearing the many different hats. They don't have time to always pick up the phone all the time.
One piece of advice. If you could just wave a magic wand and offer advice to people that just have this itch to start a business, what would it be?
You just have to start. Of course, you got to do your research on the market opportunity, and you got to be realistic about startup costs and cash flow projections because most people underestimate that stuff. But at the end of the day, once you've done that, don't be afraid to take that leap and really pursue your passion. It's going to be scary and it's going to be uncertain, but that's the common trait is that folks made that jump. But you really want to surround yourself with good advice and support, talk to other entrepreneurs, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
You use the word don't be afraid. But when I talk to small business owners, they're often intimidated about talking to their bank just because there's maybe vernacular and language they don't understand, like EBITDA. You're putting numbers on top of their dream. How do you find a way to have a common language so an entrepreneurs can come in there and open up about their dreams and challenges so that you, in fact, can become an advisor to them?
Well, I think you have to think of banks as this incredible opportunity for entrepreneurs. Our folks wake up every day wanting to help our clients and helping them succeed, and they don't get any more value in life than wanting the passion of helping others. So I think, think of them as a positive opportunity to help you. They can connect you. They also can guide you based on what's available. They can point you in the right direction on many fronts. They're almost a gateway into the various resources within RBC. So I would almost take the mindset of don't be intimidated by banks. I know they're big organizations. They seem intimidating, but they really do want to help you. And what do you got to lose? Just ask.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.